into a nomination or to be president of the United States. I don't think any billionaire ought to be able to do it, and I don't think people who suck up to billionaires in order to fund their campaigns ought to do it.
That's Elizabeth Warren talking a big talk during the debate that took place, I believe in Iowa, but it was recent. It was early February when she made those statements. And she even went further to attack and be dishonest about other opponents and what they're accepting in PAC money. But before we get to that, let me just give you the big update to this story. She's now taking PAC money and she's defending her decision to do so. So according to CNBC, Senator Elizabeth Warren revised her position on rejecting super PAC support as she seeks a comeback in the Democratic presidential primary. A super PAC backing Warren called Persist PAC, obviously this is a PAC specifically for her, filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission on Tuesday. The group immediately began airing television ads in Nevada showing former President Barack Obama praising the senator. And that makes a lot of sense because there are literally hundreds of former Obama officials who have endorsed Elizabeth Warren and now some of whom work on her campaign. And this is a little bit of an issue. There's the hypocrisy component to it, of course, but we also don't know who's funding this political action committee. The group has spent $1.7 million on television advertisements in Nevada and South Carolina, and that's according to the Medium buying, an ad buying firm. The super PAC's donors will not be publicly disclosed until after Nevada and South Carolina host their nominating contest this month. And I want to give you Warren's justification for doing this, but before I do so, I just want to again remind you of what she claimed of other candidates.
I heard everyone here talking about, as Democrats, we all want to overturn Citizens United because we want to end this unlimited spending. Yeah, except everyone on this stage, except Amy and me, is either a billionaire or is receiving help from PACs that can do unlimited spending.
So again, a lot of criticism there toward others on that stage. And the way that she worded it was meant to be dishonest. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is not a billionaire, but he accepts money from PACs, not corporate PACs. And at that time, so was Elizabeth Warren. There was no difference between what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were doing. Just want to make that clarification. Before I jump into her defense of taking PAC money, I wanted to get your thoughts.
See, I don't know whether this is a reflection of the fact that maybe she realizes that she needs this money to go forward. So it almost makes me think of the movie Doctor Strange, where the Ancient One, it turned out that she was channeling power from the dark side to make it happen. Where you're kind of like, well, however it gets done, I guess. Like maybe she just hit a shoulder shrugs, but definitely the hypocrisy is there. But I guess at least she acknowledged it. So Dan, I wanted to ask you about when Warren rejected taking money from big dollar donors, right? She's like, I'm not gonna do these fundraisers. I'm not gonna have the wine cave fundraisers like Pete Buttigieg does. The DNC was very displeased because the DNC needed her to raise money for the party. And so she agreed that she would not fundraise on her behalf, but she would continue fundraising for the DNC. I felt that distinction made little difference. And it showed like a level of dishonesty that I was concerned about. And then now everything that I believed or suspected has come to fruition. But I know I'm framing it in a way to make you answer, and I don't mean to do that. I wanted to get your thoughts. Am I being unfair to her here?
No, I mean, I think you have to look at this in a number of different perspectives. Like there's the fact that the race is very heated and Warren's not doing very well. So the gloves are off. There is the fact that environmentally speaking, as far as the political environment, the fact that Bloomberg and Steyer are ramping up all these advertisements is making it so all of these networks can charge more for their ad space. So people like Bernie Sanders, people like Elizabeth Warren, who have flavors of grassroots campaigning by their side, grassroots money, are having to spend more of that regular people's, teachers, doctors' money on these ads just to compete in the same ad space as Bloomberg. So there are these environmental factors, but still, I think the best way the Democrats can run an election is by as cleanly as possible expressing that they're the anti-corruption party. And when you get into these kind of issues where it's very clear that Warren went back on her word a year ago to now, I mean, a lot of candidates made the bet, especially Pete Buttigieg, that you could say a bunch of stuff on the campaign trail and it wouldn't matter because once all eyes are on you, we can run with that and we'll take over the country and like win the moderates. But that's not true. We have the internet. We can look back to see what happens. And so every kind of misstep or switch in behavior is going to be looked back on as a judgment on how trustworthy you are to govern. And if Democrats are trying to run against the most corrupt person we've ever had as president, and the waters are muddied around this person's integrity, it's not a winning strategy. So I am very concerned in that sense.
So do you almost think like that by means necessary is maybe where she is right now, because primarily Bloomberg stepping in and doing so well?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And maybe, just to play devil's advocate, she feels backed into a corner and feels that this is the only way that she has a shot. But I think one thing that she needs to really consider is what this type of messaging does to the Democratic voters, or what it communicates to Democratic voters. Because now more than ever, young voters especially want someone who's consistent and someone who will not waver on their values. And what this communicates is that she's willing to waver for political gain. Now, the situation is terrible because the DNC has empowered and emboldened someone like Bloomberg to run and spend unlimited amounts of money. I know he's a billionaire on these ads, and so it's difficult, but there remains one candidate who's refused to take any type of corporate PAC money. And to be clear, we don't know yet who's funding this PAC. We don't know where the money's coming from because we won't find out until after South Carolina. But this is it's a frustrating situation, I get it. But if Bernie Sanders can continue being the front runner by only raising money from small dollar donors and non-corporate PACs, I think that if Warren had a compelling message, she could do the same. But instead, she has wavered on her progressive values. That was certainly clear in her Medicare for All proposal.
Right, yeah.
And now with what she's accepting in super PAC money.
I will say this is all making, as being someone who's involved in politics and especially the Democratic side of it, the 2016, the 2020 election has made me more staunchly for overall voting reform. Like not just getting private money out of politics, but publicly funding elections, making sure that Bloomberg can't like Super Bowl ad buy his way to 20% in the polls. Like there's a whole shit. The fact that we even have this difference between, well, there's super PACs, but then there's corporate PACs, and there's these, like, it's all to the regular person, as you're getting to, Anna, is just gonna look like corruption. And that's something that Democrats need to address. This is something that they prioritized in the House. I believe the first bill they passed in the House was like a relatively symbolic, but a measure to enact certain voting level reforms and to go against voter suppression. But this needs to be a big thing, not only for Democrats to reclaim some of the trust they need, but for, quite frankly, Bernie Sanders' agenda to be as successful as it needs to be.
Yes, definitely. So from Warren, there were some justifications. Warren said that the fact that only 2 women didn't have super PAC support was just not right. Okay, that's, again, she's intentionally being dishonest and it's frustrating. So here's where I stand, she says, if all the candidates want to get rid of super PACs, count me in, I'll lead the charge, but that's how it has to be. It can't be the case that a bunch of people keep them and only 1 or 2 don't. Now, Bernie Sanders, though, let's talk a little bit about where he's at, because she's like, obviously throwing out all sorts of accusations here. But even as CNBC, of all places, reports, Senator Bernie Sanders does not have a declared super PAC backing his bid, although the super PAC connected to the Nurses Union, National Nurses United, which has endorsed Sanders, is supporting him. The group has spent about $400,000 on radio ads. So it's a little different. There's a lot more transparency there. We know where the money's coming from, but nonetheless, she persists. Don't miss your chance to win a trip to Los Angeles and have dinner with Cenk, John, and me. Just head to tyt.com/dinnerinla to register to win. Sign up for a free Aspirations spend and save account. Then you just register your eligibility and swipe your Aspiration card daily on purchases to gain entries. Not only are you entering to win a trip to Los Angeles and dinner with TYT hosts, you're also not depositing your hard-earned money into fossil fuel exploration or production. As a friendly reminder, even if you already have an Aspiration account, you must still register for eligibility into the sweepstakes.